So anyway, I told Don I'm going to introduce him and just say, if you want to know anything about anything to do with QAD, MRP, ERP, Apex, anything, talk to Don, because he is truly a guru of all of that information. But he's a project manager, a trainer, a business analyst. I mean, I could go on and on. Please read his bio if you think you have a use for anything that he could help you with. Talk to him. He also has been doing some webinars for 32 Soft that are, and I've been supporting QAD for 20 years, and I thought I knew quite a bit until Don came along and made me feel this big, because his knowledge is vast and it's very, very good information. You can go to 32 Soft's website and you can get all of those webinars from the past. So I highly recommend you check those out. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Okay, okay, good. So, welcome. First session before we've eaten. So that's always a good thing. After lunch tends to a little heavy on the stomach. So my name is Don Lindsey, and I'm currently working with Alex, as Lori had said, at 32 Soft, doing some training, do some webinars, writing a couple of blog articles. Theoretically, I'm retired. My wife says I'm not. I'm trying to pretend I am. So I've been working with QAD for about as long as Mr. Doyle. Well, maybe that long. But I have been teaching, or I've taught the Apex certification courses at Cal State Fullerton in California for about 25 years. And as a lot of us who have been working with material requirements planning, I've been doing it for about 30, 35 years. And I ran across this term DDMRP about, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I thought, what is DDMRP? As a matter of fact, how many have heard of DDMRP? Oh, okay, so we should go on. 2 or 3 of us. So this may be fairly new to you, but I started to do some investigation into what DDMRP is, and I thought for this session I would do a comparison of how MRP works, kind of a review for a few of us, and then look at this thing called DDMRP and what does it mean for the future of planning. So we'll talk just about a little bit about ERP. I'd like to cover some tools of MRP because we'll find that those are still applicable to this new concept of DDMRP. And then I'll walk through some of the mechanics, just a simple explosion example so we understand how MRP does its calculations. And then I'd like to talk about the mechanics of DDMRP, or demand-driven MRP. Terminology. Terminology is important for any subject in ERP. The left-hand side are all the things that we're probably familiar with: part numbers, lot sizes, purchase make codes, time fences, etc. But when we start to talk about DDMRP, there's a whole bunch of new terminology that we need to become aware of. Lead time categories, average daily usage, zones, red, yellow, and green zones. So if you don't understand some of the terms that I use and the acronyms that I use, you can look them up on Google, obviously, or go to the knowledge base. Lots of good information on the knowledge base. Or just send Alex or myself a quick email and we'll try to help you understand what there are. I usually make reference to Mr. Linder. I understand from Lori that he's a board member, and he wrote a great article. If you have the opportunity to go back to MUG spring of 2018, he wrote an article or he gave a presentation on I Love My Wiki. And if you're going to be involved with any knowledge, you really should consider developing a wiki that would explain how your organization deals with knowledge and information. So a good company data dictionary, excellent thing to have. So terminology is something we're going to have to become very familiar with. So where did MRP come from? Well, I and a few of us other gray-haired old gentlemen here may remember back in the late 1960s, IBM developed a tool called the BOM, the Bill of Material Processor. And what that allowed computers, big computers, big as this room, to do was to represent the product structure of a particular item in terms of bytes and bits, basically in terms of the parent-component relationships. So based on that BOM, gentlemen, Joe Orlicky, Ollie White, George Plossel, Vandermark, a whole bunch of other smart people developed this thing called a time phase explosion of the bill of material, or what was termed material requirements planning. So this was back in the late 50s, early 60s. And so since then, MRP has become basically the tool that we use to do material planning. It's been around for almost 50 years. And it is the primary tool. If you look at Oracle, or you look at SAP, or Infor, or anybody that does MRP, they are going to do MRP like it was designed back in the early 1960s. There's a great website, I mentioned it to Lance last night at dinner, called the ERPgraveyard.com. Great. If you ever want to know what happened to the ERP system that you used to use and who owns it now, is Infor own it, or did Oracle buy it, or what? It's a great tool, ERP Graveyard. So MRP is kind of where we started, and in about the 1990s, Gardner turned this term called ERP, Enterprise Requirements Planning. So MRP calculates material requirements, but you got to understand what your capacities are. You need to be able to forecast. You need to be able to buy things. So these other applications were added on to the MRP application, and it was then referred to as MRP2, big MRP. Then Gardner came across with this term called ERP, Enterprise Material Requirements Planning. So here's the old Apex body of knowledge. This is the flow chart that usually are for business planning, production planning, master scheduling, MRP, capacity, shop work and purchasing, and then the ubiquitous cost people down there trying to keep track of how much all this costs the organization. So this turned into ERP, and now we have a whole plethora of applications. EDI, I heard somebody mention EDI this morning. IoT, Internet of Things, that's going to change what the keynote speakers say. That's going to change lots of things. Virtual reality, artificial intelligence, shop floor control, activity-based costing. So lots of things have to be in place in order for this one ERP system to be applicable to the future of our manufacturing environments. So we're going to concentrate primarily on material requirements planning. So we're just going to look at a little section of that, although one of the more important sections of that, to determine what MRP is and how that relates to this thing called DDMRP. Benefits of the ERP, it's been proved, improved customer service, inventory management, operating efficiencies, planning capabilities, supplier. It is really the tool that we all use to run our businesses. And it helps enforce this thing called a formal planning process. Anybody use spreadsheets? Yeah, you probably do. Lots of companies use spreadsheets to do MRP these days. So the implementation of an ERP system and subsequently the MRP aspect of that really are going to benefit your organization. So let's take a look at a couple of tools that we need to have in place for MRP. The first is, how do we deal with demand? Because demand is primary. I used to have a large ego when I was a young man, and I started off in production inventory control, and I thought we were the best organization in the entire thing. We did all planning, and we made things happen, and we expedited, and I learned that if you don't sell it, we're pretty useless. So you've got to have sales, and how we deal with sales or demand, projected demand, is very key to how we are going to use our MRP system. So the first is what we call independent demand, and this is demand that is at the whim of the customer. So the customer can do whatever he wants, because we're here to serve the customer, sell him more product, make a profit, go home, barbecue on the weekends, make sure that we're having a good time. So dependent demand is one of these types of demand. Dependent demand is the other kind of demand, and that is demand that is derived by this BOM, this bill of material processor that was invented back in the 1960s by IBM. This is what we use to determine the dependent demand. Its characteristics are it's internal, it's intermediate, it's lumpy, and demand is calculated. So we forecast independent demand and we calculate dependent demand. So there are specific techniques that we use for each of these, and we'll talk about both the independent and the dependent demand. So some parts have both spare parts. Good example, you use an assembly to actually build your end product, but it may fail in the field, and so you have to carry that as an inventory item. It is subject to the whim of the customer, and so it needs to be forecast. So some items have both independent and dependent demand. There's this thing called sales and operations planning. Sales and operations planning is basically the heart of ERP. This is what is making ERP work for your organization. It's the CEO, it's the CFO, it's the head of R&D, the head of sales, the head of engineering, the head of operations, all get together every month, review the performance of the previous month, and come up with a plan for the organization for the next period. Whether that period be the next month, next 3 months, next 6 months, whatever. So it reconciles all supply and demand and new products into some aggregate plan. And this becomes the basis of what the MRP system is going to recognize as demand. So first of all, we need to forecast. So forecast drives MRP through the master production schedule. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time discussing the master production schedule. It's basically the anticipated realistic build plan. So in order to determine what that master production schedule is, first of all, we need to forecast independent demand, and we can use mathematical techniques using historical data. So every time you sell something, you record that fact in some table in QAD, and that becomes a historical demand. You can use the accumulation of all those historical demands to build a mathematical model of what you expect demand to be over the future. The other type of demand is what is called qualitative. And this is basically subjective knowledge of your marketplace. Eugene knows how many pieces of farm equipment you're going to build. So you've got an idea, you go to trade shows, and so you interface with your competitors and you have an understanding of what the marketplace is. And this is what is referred to as subjective. So the combination of those two, the mathematical calculation of the historical demand and the subjective knowledge of your marketing, your sales, your CFO, your CFO, that combined will then give you the forecast. It is the objective projection modified by subjective knowledge. And we have tools in the system that allow us to do that. The only problem is the forecast. People who do it and the people who use it. So there's a couple of methods. I talked about qualitative. This is based on information, intuitive. It tends to be subjective, and it's usually used for medium to long term. There's some different kinds of qualitative, panel consensus, Delphi, market surveys. Anybody have a CFO that tells you what you're going to do? That's probably a lot of the subjective, qualitative decisions. And then there's quantitative. This is what's based upon the historical data. And this is based upon the fact that you pretty much expect what happened yesterday to happen tomorrow, at least in the short term. So, as I said, the combination of these two or combined become the forecast. There's a lot of statistical techniques for forecasting. Average, moving average, exponential smoothing. Basically, a forecast is an average, and an average is a forecast. I get marketing people who are all hung up on, what is a forecast? So what am I forecasting? Dollars, units, opinions. Basically, a statistical forecast is just a simple average, and we have mathematical equations that allow us to do that. There's one of the most famous, exponential smooth. Some of the new forecast is equal to alpha times the old forecast plus 1 minus times actual sales. So you can calculate the forecast, you plug the figures into that mathematical formula, very straightforward, and you come up with F sub n, which is the new forecast. Now you double smooth that, you can triple smooth it, you can get crazy and go into regression analysis and Holt-Winters methods and neural networks and all sorts of stuff. And I personally think these are going to be the future of forecasting. This is where we're all headed. And this is what is going to drive not only MRP but DMRP. 22.1. How many use 22.1? Okay. This is where you plug in that F sub n into your forecast. So each period you go in and for these periods you plug in what you've calculated, both objectively and subjectively, for your forecast. So this is does anybody use 22.7? Great tool, great tool. 22.7 is simulated forecast. So you can create a forecast ID for anything, for the next budget, for tomorrow, for the next year, for the next physical inventory, or whatever you want to do, and you can then apply into it. This is basic QAD functionality, is what everybody's got. You can apply either double moving or exponential or classic. Here's simple regression. So you can go in there and you can create your own forecast and calculate what that forecast is going to be based on whatever method you think is most appropriate for your particular environment. And then you can use the detail maintenance to go in there and make modifications. So in QAD right now, without any tool, you've got the ability to go in and really do an excellent job of trying to estimate what that future demand is. Safety stock, another tool of MRP, because yes, what's going to happen? What you plan to happen is not going to happen. There's variations. Suppliers are going to miss schedule. Customers are not going to order in the same way that you thought they were going to. Production's going to have scrap, downtime, things that you didn't expect to happen. So you need to guard your plan against these variations. And we use what is called safety stock. Safety stock is calculated by another formula. Computers love formulas. Safety stock is equal to K, the desired service level, times MAD, mean absolute deviation of the forecast demand to the actual demand, adjusted for the difference between the lead time interval and the forecast interval. That's a very straightforward tool. You can use the old bell curve. Everybody remembers in high school, you were graded on your bell curve. And it also depends on the frequency of order. How often do you order? This is the old reorder point cycle graph, sometimes called the sawtooth curve. And this is how you calculate safety stock. And I could spend probably an hour and a half explaining all the math behind that. But basically, you're trying to develop a logical approach to how much inventory you're going to have. MRP treats safety stock in a very specific way. If you have safety stock in the system, MRP says you bought it. It's yours. It's not going anywhere because MRP uses the net requirement calculation to never go below safety stock. So if you put in 100 units of safety stock at a particular part and it costs, $100,000 to build, you just bought 10 of them. And they're always going to be there and you're never going to get rid of them. And MRP is always going to plan to have them. So safety stock is the tool that we use in MRP to guard against this variation in demand. And we'll see in DDMRP that safety stock fills a completely different kind of a function. But the calculations are basically the same. If you're familiar with 1.4.1 or 1.4.17, this is where you're going to put it in. You've got safety stock. You've also got this thing called safety time, which artificially increases the planned order release date from the planned order due date. So it gives the planners a little bit more time, more safety time. Should be very cautious with those because, as I say, this handles safety stock as an increase in additional to the net requirement. But safety stock is a good thing, and if it's managed correctly, can be very beneficial. Economic order quantity. So MRP tells us when we need to order. How do we figure out how much we need to order? Well, we do that through what is called the economic order quantity. This is the basic formula for calculating the order quantity in an ERP environment. It starts off here. You can see that as you order more, you're going to have them around for longer. So the costs are going to be higher. If you order, if you order more, if you have that inventory, you can do a comparison between the ordering cost and the carrying cost and come up with this thing called the total cost. So what the math of the process does is it simply takes this formula, square root of twice the annual usage times the setup divided by the carrying cost. If you want to do it in terms of units, it's twice the annual usage times the setup divided by the carrying cost times the unit cost, either one. And so that calculation gives you that point on the total cost curve. So you can now go in and in 1.4.7 or 1.4.17 in that order quantity field, you're going to plug in that economic order quantity. So QAD, MRP, is going to use that as the suggested order quantity when it does its calculation, its netting, and its planning of new planned orders against planned order releases. So, EOQ. As Lori said, I gave a webinar, I think it was Alex, a couple of months ago on the guts of MRP. If you want to go back on the 32 website, look. And I went through all of the elements of the item master file, and the item planning, and item cost, and item inventory. And I don't have time to go through all of them, but this is something that should be, what, 100% accurate. You don't want sloppy data. I think I heard keynote speaker say something about that today, that master data integration is critical. So the programmers who wrote QED, our beloved TAM, and all the people who developed QED back in the 70s, 80s, they didn't put these values, these lead time, multiple order, lot size things into the system for them to be blank or inaccurate. If you want MRP to do what it's supposed to do, you need to tell it the truth. You need to tell it accurate information. You're going to find that same is true with DDMRP. So, and then BOM, the bill of material. So here's a simple bill of material. This is the way that we usually see it. A bill of material is not apparent on the list of components. That's not what the BOM is. The BOM is a set of parent component relationships. If you go into 13.5 or even 15.5 for formula maintenance, what you see is a parent item and a component item. And then the same parent and another component, the same parent and another component. So what you have is a series of records, parent component records, that make up this bill of material. A listed bill of material is simply a way that the programmers use to format the output of that bill of material system. So, typical elements within the BOM, parent and component. Sometimes the sequence, the quantity required, that's got to be 100% accurate. Because as we'll see from MRP, that's what's going to drive the records down for the explosion. Scrap factors, effective dates. So if you want to calculate what the number of G's required for this AR, you can go in and calculate that based on this bill of material relationship, our gross number of requirements for G's to make an A, in this case, is 24. And that is based on what is called the low-level code. Low-level code is in the BOM, the lowest level at which you will find a particular part number in any bill of material in the system. It tells MRP that it can now explode the gross requirements for that. It can calculate the gross requirement because it knows that it will find no more requirements lower in the bill of material than that particular item. So this is going to give you purchase items of G, H, and D, 24 G's, and it will do, this is what you do with MRP. When you hit 23.1 or 23.2 or 23.3 for the explosions, this is what's happening behind the scenes. So, 3 objectives for MRP: ensure materials available, maintain the lowest possible material and product, and plan manufacturing activities. The goal of MRP is to deliver the right product at the right time, at the right quantity. That's what MRP is planning to do. And it's based, again, on independent, random demand and dependent or parent-component relationships. This is what MRP is. So, it resides, as we saw, in any, if you look at any ERP flowchart, you're going to find material requirements planning right in the middle of the process. So what are the inputs to MRP? Well, first it's the master production schedule. Who does that? People. Who does the bill of material? People. Who does timing data? People. Who takes care of the inventory? People. Always annoys me that they say it's the computer. It's not the computer. It's people. And what we find when we deal with MRP, if we're going to any company and their MRP is not working, it's either people don't understand, the data's wrong. It's not the computer. The computer knows exactly what to do. And you'll find with DDMRP, it is the people again who make the system work. So the characteristics of MRP is it's product oriented, it's based on a bill of material, it's time phased, based on the shop calendar. Make sure you go into calendar maintenance and holiday maintenance, and make sure that, because otherwise you'll be scheduling things on days that aren't there. It's forward-looking, based on a master production schedule, which is based upon a forecast. It's flexible. It continually recalculates. If anybody's familiar with the explosion processes in QAD, there's that one called, I think it's 22, net change. I have planners do that 5 times a day. Net change, recalculate. And then on the weekends, do a regen, total recalculation. So it is built to make material be at the right time, in the right quantity for you to build your schedule. MRP is based upon this principle, and we'll find that DDMRP is also only manage that which goes wrong, not that which goes right. The exception messages that you get out of MRP are going to be based upon what is out of phase with the plan. If your part is in phase with the plan, don't have to worry about it. So the basis of MRP is that bill of material, and out here at the end item, final assembly, we put a due date. That's the master production schedule. We offset that by the lead time in the system. We calculate a start date, and then we go through that same process for all the sub-assemblies and purchase items back through what is called cumulative manufacturing lead time. So that's what this explosion process is doing, is calculating this set of due dates versus start dates. That becomes the due date of the next child, then offset that becomes the start date of that child, and down through the product structure. So MRP assumes a couple things. It assumes you either do what it said to do. If it says release an order, you get it. If it says expedite, you get it. If it says de-expedite, you get it. The MRP is assuming that you either do what it tells you. It assumes, you told them the truth. That everything you've got in that system is exactly what's going to happen. So all your due dates are correct. All your order quantities are correct. All your quantity on hands are correct. So you told it the truth. It also, and we'll look at this in what we call the rules of misalignment, it's easier to expedite an order than to place a new order. If you told us it's going to take X days to complete a work order, then MRP is going to assume that that's what's going to happen. So you can see that this telling it the truth is very critical to how MRP works. If it tells you to expedite or delay a receipt, then it assumes you're going to be successful at that. And that you have told it everything you know. So you dump your brain inside QAD and make sure that QAD knows as much about that product as you do. This is the basic processing. First of all, we looked at how we determine gross requirements. We determined the available inventory on hand, projected on hand as scheduled receipts. We'll see there's a little bit of a change in the DDMRP calculation for that. Then it calculates net requirements, calculates planned orders, offsets by lead times, and writes exception messages, or new orders, or delays, or cancel, or reschedules. Whatever it needs to do to bring the system back into phase with the plan. And it does this low-level code by low-level code by item by time period. So that explosion calculation that you get when you do 23.2 is pretty intensive. It goes through this series of calculations. Here's just a simple example. We've got expended gross requirements, scheduled receipts. We've got 20 in period 2, start with 10. MRP is simply going to go out and start to calculate this projected quantity on hand, or projected available. When it runs into a negative projected quantity on hand, it calculates a net requirement. If it's got a net requirement, it's going to plan an order. If it plans an order, it's going to offset by the lead time. And MRP assumes that you're going to release that order in period 3, and it's going to come in period 5, and your quantity of hand is going to be 0. So it goes through that process. If you look at it from a explosion point of view, here we've got X and Y. Part number 1 goes into both. We've got a lead time of 4 to build X's and 6 to build Y's. We've got 95 on hand, an allocation of 20, we'll talk about that in a second. A safety stock, I'm allowing to do later. Lead time is 3 periods and lot size is 3. So you can go in and MRP is going to explode down, planned order release of the parent comes the gross requirement of the component. And you can see that here you're going to calculate all the gross requirements for part number 1. Then 95 on hand, 20 allocated, we're just going to subtract those. We've got 75 to start the process. We consume 15 in the period. The projected quantity on hand is 60. Goes to 20, schedule receipt, 50. Now we come to this negative 10 position. That requirement, planned order offset, planned order release or receipt is 10 because the lot size is 100. Planned order release is going to come back in and inventory is going to adjust. You've also got the modifiers, order policies, discrete. Here's your fixed order quantity or EOQ, period order quantity, which is based upon your periods of demand. And you've got your minimum, maximum, and multiple orders, which you'll see in the system. So if we go through here, we can see we're just going to drive down our requirements for the arm assembly. From the chair, we got a schedule of 50. We come in and we can calculate then based upon the schedule for the arms. That's going to come, and now we're going to drive down to the arm rest. And you can see we've got 25, we've got a negative, we've got a net requirement, and now we're going to do a planned order based on POQ, period quantity, which in this case is 4 periods. It's going to come in, and MRP is going to schedule out into the future. So that's exactly what QAD is doing when it does the explosion. You can see how critical the spacing or the logic of these lead time, safety stocks, lot sizes, order quantities, and max quantities are. So allocations, basically uncashed stock receipts. That's what we got out in the system. And now there are these rules of misalignment. This is basically what MRP is doing with the realignment of the plan. It basically says an open order, scheduled order period following a period in which the on-hand balance goes negative, you expedite. If you've got an open order for a period in which the gross requirement is less than or equal to the projected, de-expedite. So I've got my gross requirements coming down. I really need to have that 200 a period earlier. So you're going to get an expedite message. MRP assumes you're going to do what it tells you, assumes you're going to be successful. It calculates that to now go out to the next. Those 50 I really don't need because I don't need them to period 7. So MRP is going to tell you to reschedule, delay that. Most planners ignore delays and counts, but we don't say about that. And so those 50 don't even need. So this rescheduling tool is what MRP is doing when it's going through these recalculations. Accuracy for MRP, you gotta have knowledge, you gotta have people understand how it works. You gotta have accuracy, you gotta have discipline. On-hand discipline, due date discipline, on-order discipline, purchase order, work orders, everything that has to do with how you're manipulating that data. So if you do that, then MRP works, and it works very well. I've seen companies do, I'm sure Parentis work with companies that do a good job of MRP. A lot of us don't. So let's talk about DDMRP. DDMRP is demand driven. It's a method or a model to plan and manage supply chains to protect and promote the flow of relevant information and material. DDMRP uses what are called strategic decoupling points to drive the supply order generation and management of material through the supply chain.
We all started off, I'm sure Dave used to do Cardiff systems. When I first started back then, we had an army of ladies in a room about this size who did nothing but calculated MRP on Cardiff systems. That's how it started. Real point safety stocks. Then we have MRP. If we'll remember back in the late 90s, we started to hear about Kanban, you know, all of these lean tools. I've heard comments that people said, oh, you don't need MRP, all you need is Kanban. Found out that wasn't true, and so now we've got what is referred to as DDMRP, and I truly believe that as computers become more and more powerful, that the Internet of Things becomes more and more prevalent, we find ourselves with digital twins and all the things that are coming in terms of technology, that we will have ERP systems that can actually recalculate this. I think the gentleman talked about jobs going away. We got to worry about ours in the supply chain, because someday we're going to have a smart computer, and they're going to do all the planning for us. So, DDMRP was introduced back in about 2011. Orlicky's version 3 had a couple of chapters on DDMRP. If you want the library number, you can go look at it. Chad Smith and Carol Patak, they're now the operators of what's called the Demand Driven Institute, and they're the ones that introduced this concept. We talked about classical MRP. Here is the handout, and here's how we run material requirements planning. The problem with MRP, and I'm sure some of us have run into this problem, is that because it is end item oriented, it can really get a bill of material with lots and lots of components, lots and lots of subassemblies. It can get out of phase really quick. And so a lot of people fall back on this spreadsheet problem. Ellie Goldrath, if anybody hasn't read that, you should be shocked. If you're in the materials field, you should read the gold. Ellie pointed out this thing called the bullwhip effect, that slight variations in the supply chain from the demand point of view can multiply and cause massive changes back into the supplier organization. Similarly, you can see a similar graph with variations in supply affecting demand. So the use of MRP, if not done really, really carefully, really, really exactly, can cause issues. So this thing called DDMRP takes material requirements planning, distribution. If anybody's another book that you have to read if you're in materials, ERP by Abbott, by Andre Martin, Abbott Labs. He's the guy that invented DRP. Lean, Kanban, all know theory of constraints, Ellie, Goldrath, Six Sigma, Denning, Toyota, and then innovation. So DDMRP takes all of this information, most of it we already know about, because we in the supply chain already have this information in our toolboxes. So the methodology is fairly straightforward. You develop these strategic positioning buffers, or specific strategic inventory positions. Then you create what are called budget or buffer profiles and levels. Then the system automatically adjusts for changes in the system. Average daily usage might be different today than it was yesterday. It might be different today than it is in the future. So the DDMRP system has this adjustment factor built in. So these three design and modeling phases are really the key to how you make DDMRP work. Then demand-driven planning will look at what's called the net flow equation. Remember, we know what the net requirement calculation is. Net flow is basically how we determine what needs to be ordered. And then there's some really neat tools that allow you to see exactly what is happening out in the shop floor. So the first step is this strategic decoupling process. So you basically just decide where in the supply chain you're going to place these buffer points. And this is going to help us guard against demand variability and supply variability. And through the process of developing these strategic inventory positions, this is how we're going to do the explosion in the calculation of our requirements. And by virtue of that, we can compress the lead time. So instead of having CMLT, as a cumulative manufacturing lead time is, now we've got a series of smaller, more compressed lead times for our requirements calculations. So we decouple the inventory, we decouple the lead times, and guard ourselves against variability. The criteria for these, and I talked to the turkey guys. The turkey guys? Somebody? Yeah. They already own Dynasys. And Dynasys does this. Dynasys already helps you calculate this. So in guarding or defining these criteria points, you look at customer tolerance. Is the customer willing to wait for the product? Do you have any new possibilities of customers that might buy it? So we might want to build some inventory at that point. We look at supply variability, demand variability, inventory, what's called leverage, return. How common is the item? Is it used on other kinds of products? And does it consume critical raw resources? So you can develop these processes as to how you're going to develop these points. And this is just a picture of what a supply chain might look like after you have gone through this strategic decoupling calculation process. It becomes the basis of the bomb explosion, reduces lead time at the decoupling points, and decouples demand both in terms of supply and demand. So once you've developed those, then you go in and you calculate what are called buffer profiles and levels. And these regulate the necessary stock levels for each item. You've got a green, which is, that's just the order generation. We're always going to try and calculate up into the green. If we calculate a inventory status that's in the yellow, then it's going to order up. And red tells you that you better do something. You got problems. So you go through and you calculate based on some some item data, and it's like the item master file, only more information. Lead time categories, variability categories, order multipliers, and then individual part basis, which is your average daily usage, your discrete lead times, your min-max quantities, locations, etc. And so you go through this calculation and you come up with these zones and buffer levels for each particular part. And so this then becomes a forecast, your average daily usage lead time. This tells you what you need to order. So you can go in and you can do an exact calculation. The software does this for you once you've done your input of the variables. Then the system is going to calculate your green zone, your yellow zone, and your red zones. So once you've calculated those, the system can do what's called top of zone calculations. So you can calculate the exact value of the top of the green zone, top of the yellow, and the top of the red zone. The system automatically adjusts for changes in the average daily usage. It recalculates based on seasonality, new product introduction, product life cycle. It goes through and does these calculations in average daily usage by, again, that forecasting process that we talked about earlier. So, seasonality, ramp up, ramp down. And then once these are set, then the system goes in and based upon, and we recognize this is almost the projected quantity on hand, only now it's on hand plus on order minus what is called qualified demand. And qualified demand is any demand that occurs today or yesterday, because obviously the customer wants it. Or if you've got, let's say, who uses customer schedule? A lot of us, automatic, in the automotive industry. You've got demand that is set, only they don't want it until next month or the month after, whatever. And so that might be called a qualified demand. And so if you take on hand plus on order minus qualified, the system calculates what is called the available stock. And based upon the value of the stock, it will place it in one of these buffer zones. And one of the things I like about DDMRP is it's colorful. It's got lots of colors that you can use visually, because I've worked with so many MRP planners that just their eyes glaze over because of all part numbers. And there's nothing really easy about analyzing MRP order action report. But DDMRP really gives you this nice, clean tool that tells you where these buffers are based on average daily usage, the replenishment lead time, and the bill of material explosion through the system. So that all calculates to what this thing is called the net flow requirement. It's very similar to the net requirements line in MRP, only now it's only demand. It's not forecast, it's not projection, it's only ordering exactly what you need based on what your supply is, what you're on hand, your on order, and this qualified demand. So if the calculation of your available stock is in the yellow, it's going to give you a requirement to order up to the top of the green. As I say, it's very colorful. I get this straight out of Dynasis. It's your quantity on hand based on your available stock. It gives you a really good tool to look at what is happening out on the shop. So every day the planner carries out the same kind of basic requirements planning that is done with MRP, only now they've got this tool that gives them exactly where do you want to have those inventory. If you got a yellow, are you up to red, or what are you going to order? It explodes through what is called a decoupled explosion. So as you develop these strategically decoupled points in the bill of material, this is MRP. When you hit 23.2, boom, it explodes every single bill in the system. With DDMRP, it's only calculating down to the next strategically decoupled point in the bill of material. So if you look at it in terms of custom orders, it runs into a buffer point. It calculates a order. It runs a decoupled MRP every night, where you can run it during the day, just like we do with MRP. And then you're going to get 2 validated replenishment orders out of the planning process. Execution, highly visible. It's the buffers allow you to look at the zone that it's in along with a percentage of importance, basically. You don't have that in MRP because it's based on the buffer status instead of priority by due date. What's MRP? MRP is priority by due date. So the planner goes through, calculates this, and based on these colors and the reports that come out of the DDMRP system, we are looking at material synchronization, lead time alerts, lots of tools that help us with this difference between due date priority and buffer status. So the 4 basic innovations of DDMRP are kind of like MRP. It is decoupled lead time based on those strategically decoupled points. The net flow equation, which tells us what we need to order. Decoupled explosions and I think most importantly for the organization is relative priorities, that we know exactly what to work on based on the color and the percentage of demand. So, MRP versus DDRP. No decoupling. MRP just explodes demand off the end of it. DDMRP uses these strategically placed decoupling. So MRP is not designed to manage stock positions, is it? Because safety stock, right there, it's only exploded and make the schedule process. DDMRP is specifically designed to manage stock. It never nets to zero. What does MRP do? Nets to zero. Or if you get safety stock. It's, and I've seen this a lot in MRP environments and QED. The safety stocks and lead times and the order policies were set 5 years ago when we implemented. And they've never been reviewed. Whereas now, stock markers are, by the system, dynamically adjusted. So you've got a tool that's constantly looking at the data and automatically buffering. MRP attempts to gauge safety stock. Like I said, if you got safety stock in MRP, you bought it. But just the accountants don't like that. Whereas with DDMRP, DDMRP assumes that you're going to use the safety stock, and it's intended to do that. Forecasting triggers advanced signals, so that guarantees that things are going to go wrong. That's the first thing about forecasts, they're always wrong. Whereas supply orders are tied directly to actual demand. You're not trying to satisfy forecast demand, you're doing actual demand. Priority by due dates in MRP, buffer status in DDMRP. So lots of benefits. Increased flow, higher service levels, less expedites, optimal inventories, and planners love it because it's easier to deal with. It's really straightforward. Once you understand how it works and what the tools are, it really is a good tool. Like I said, QAD bought Dynasis a couple of years ago.
About 5 now.
About 5 years ago. And Dynasis got a whole lot of other tools besides DDMRP. It's got sales and operations planning and all sorts of stuff that helps with QAD. It's got nice dashboards. Like I say, I like it because it's colorful. It's pretty pictures, easier to deal with. Dashboard, profile levels, planning, execution, etc. So Dynasis is in fact certified or qualified by the DDI, the Demand Driven Institute. So it plays with SAB, LilyWorks, SAP, IFS. So it is the tool that we at 3D should probably think about using if we want to address this DDRP. Lots of organizations, for some reason, and Brett and I were talking about this, it doesn't seem to be real popular in America. I don't know why. Maybe we like to suffer with MRP. But in Europe and Asia and South America, it's huge. It is just, it's commonly applied across the design. And if you go to this website, give you lots of case studies. The Demand Driven Institute has lots of information out there. I put together some literary resources. One of the things I learned when I started to investigate DDMRP, lots of new stuff to learn. It kind of makes sense because of our supply chain background, MRP that we've been doing for 50 years. But you really need to understand it. There's some additional stuff. You can see Ono, you can see Martin, you can see Deming. You really need to explore what this is. Here's a great article I ran across. Empirical comparison. They actually go through the math of what is better, DDMRP or MRP. That's a good read if anybody's wants. So, here we are, 1:30. MRP, what is it? Tools, safety stock, MRP. We talked about how that works, and then we've spent some time on hopefully understanding what DDMRP is a little bit more about. We looked at bullwhip, some buffers, how it works, the decoupled, the strategic points, this nut flow equation, execution, and benefits. So, any questions?